His Excellency Ernest Ravamcho is the High Commissioner of Rwanda to the India. He is also accredited to Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Prior to his appointment to India, Mr. Ravamcho was High Commissioner of Rwanda to the United Kingdom and non-resident ambassador to Ireland. Ravamcho has extensive experience working on development and poverty reduction policies in sub-Saharan Africa. He worked with the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, in New York as policy advisor on the Millennium Development Goals. Before joining UNDP, Ernest Ravamcho worked for the government of Rwanda as Director General for Economic Development Planning in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. He was also Director of Strategic Planning and Poverty Reduction Monitoring in the ministry. Ernest worked at the Rwandese Patriotic Front as a head of economic planning before joining Rwanda's Ministry of Finance. Ravamcho has been chair and member of board of directors of several public and private enterprises and non-governmental organizations. He was also a researcher and assistant lecturer at the University of Rwanda. Ernest Ravamcho holds a master's degree in development policy and planning from Cornell University and a bachelor degree in public administration from the National University of Rwanda. Mr. Ravamcho was awarded 2012 Diplomat of the Year from Africa by Diplomat magazine in London. We are delighted and deeply honored to have with us our esteemed guest, His Excellency Ernest Ravamcho. May I request His Excellency to please come and enlighten the audience with your knowledge of wisdom. Sir, please, may I have a big round of applause for His Excellency.
Thank you for that generous introduction. Mr. Mohan Gag, Mr. Ajay Sahai, Mr. J.M.A. David, Mr. Alan W. Smith, Professor Anand Prakash, Dr. C.S. Sharma, dignitaries, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. I'm privileged to be part of this very important discussion today. The issue of uncertainty is very important to all of us, particularly to you, students of management, students of engineering, people who will be project managers of tomorrow, financiers, bankers, entrepreneurs, investors. This is a very, very important topic because we definitely live in a very uncertain and very unstable world. I think if you look across the globe, you see a lot of uncertainty. If you begin with what has happened just within the last few years, starting with the global economic and financial crisis that the world went into, and we are still struggling, many economies are still struggling to come out of that. Go to the events of the Arab Spring in the last few years across North Africa. Come to what we see now in Ukraine and Crimea. And across the globe, you see a lot of uncertainty. We are even dealing with issues of trying to locate a plane that up to now we don't know where it is. So there are a lot of issues across the globe in different areas, on different subjects, on different issues. And I think this creates opportunities and challenges for us. So coping with uncertainty is certainly very important. And we are just glossing over the different topics. We are not even touching on the important issues of our survival, climate change, and other issues. So I think this is a very, very important topic that I believe many of you and the academics and experts that we have across this room will have a lot of time to really go into these issues and discuss. I come from Rwanda, a country that has suffered gross uncertainty. As many of you might know, my country went through a tragic genocide in 1994. Certainly the genocide was not unpredictable because it was a result of historical circumstances that could have been predicted. But certainly when it broke loose, nobody could intervene to stop it. Since then, we've had to deal with a lot of issues of rebuilding the country. Just to go briefly, despite the devastation in 1994, Rwanda is now on course to grow and become a new nation of tolerance, of economic prosperity, of growth, of opportunity for all. But we still have a lot of issues to deal with. Even now, my career has been mostly in poverty reduction and planning, but even now we cannot predict what the GDP growth for Rwanda is going to be over the next year, because a lot of changes happen along the way, and we have to keep dealing with quite a lot of issues. But generally speaking, I wanted to take a few minutes to share with you some of what I think are my thoughts on this subject of coping with uncertainty, and I'll just go through over them briefly. I didn't have much time to prepare for this, a very important speech. I have been in Kigali for the last couple of weeks, and I only came back yesterday and was asked to be here. But I thought still there are quite a lot of thoughts to share with you on this subject, and I'll just throw some of them in the hope that you can digest them over the course of this conference. One, my first experience in India was that actually Indians are the best experts I've seen on coping with uncertainty. Just hitting the daily traffic, you just take a sample across the back of the cars, and you see drivers very, very cautious. They write on their car behind, "Horn, please, horn, please, horn, please." And below they write, "Use dipper at night." That's very smart. That's a very good way of coping with uncertainty, because you don't want to be driving and then turn around and run into another car. And that is very adhered to, because when you hear how people are horning, poo, poo all over the place, it's really the best strategy to manage uncertainty. So that's a very, very important, and I think it's a very important lesson I've learned in India, that you don't take anything for granted, and that's very important. But I think as young people, because most of you are students here, I think one very important issue to think about uncertainty is that I think the best way to mitigate uncertainty is to be a risk taker. Because if you're a risk taker, and as young people you can afford to be risk takers, if you're not a risk taker, you can never be a good entrepreneur. And certainly risk taking means that you know there are uncertainties, you don't know what will happen, but go for it. You just go for it. And I think the important way is that when you take the risk, you run into a mistake, you learn from that mistake. My president, President Kagame, says, "I don't mind if you make a mistake once. What I will worry about is if you keep making the same mistake over and over again." So I think risk-taking is part of being a successful entrepreneur, and we could never do anything if we don't take the risk, if we don't take the jump, if we don't take the faith and go for it. So if there is anything I want to leave you with, is to say that uncertainty should not stop you from taking risks, especially calculated risks. And especially if you have to invest your money, you've got to be cautious and know that you're taking a risk, but it has to be a calculated risk. That will take me to some of the other things that I would like to talk about. So prevention and mitigation is also very important. So much as uncertainty is there, but we need to be thinking of better ways of preventing. Certainly some things are not foreseen. But I think if we take some time, there are some things that we can foresee. We could see some signs. We could see some glimmer of something that is likely to happen that might be conducive or adversarial to what we are trying to achieve. And so we need to be cautious and thinking of ways of preventing and mitigating uncertainty. But certainly what I say, that uncertainty should not stand in our way of success in our life. That's the most important thing as young people in this college that I would really like to share with you. Secondly, uncertainty should actually enable us to think creatively on how to put in place early warning systems, so that we can get indicators and hints of what is likely to go wrong. So putting in place early warning systems for anything, climate change mitigation, for hunger management, for ensuring that if farmers are planting crops, they can be able to have some signs that there might be a drought coming and how to mitigate that drought. So putting in place early warning systems, I think science has enabled us to actually develop these systems into a greater precision. But we need to be aware that in everything we do, we need to be able to, even if it's a project, a construction you are putting up, you need to have clear steps that will warn you that something might not be going wrong. The project is going to veer off course. The project is not going to be met on time. So I think we can be able to mitigate all those. But that requires that we have refined tools of analysis, refined tools of research, refined tools of assessment. And I think, again, academics, research, and has enabled us to come up with those tools and to keep refining existing tools, because knowledge is not static. Knowledge keeps moving, and we can keep building and strengthening the tools that already exist for mitigating and coping with uncertainty. So that's very, very important. I think the gates of knowledge are wide open, and we can stretch them as far as we want to go. And I think that's the challenge that I think young people like you should be taking on, to keep refining tools of analysis, tools that ensure that we can cope and mitigate uncertainty. Uncertainty also calls for timely and coordinated interventions. We've seen cases where uncertainty and disaster are stuck, and intervention has been there, but in an uncoordinated way, or it's not come in time. I certainly come from a continent that is prone to uncertainties, and a lot of challenges we have is that at times, interventions are not well coordinated, or when they come, they are not timely to save life. So it's very, very important that we think of ways of intervening in a timely, but also in a coordinated manner, with a much better use and deployment of resources. I think that's something that also would help us to cope with uncertainty and to deal with uncertainty when consequences have occurred. Innovation and making best use of available technologies. As I was saying, science enables us to develop or keep improving on existing tools and technologies. I think innovation is key to that, and innovation again is knowledge. Innovation is a continuous search for better ways of doing things, and more effective use of resources and available knowledge to ensure that we cope with uncertainty. Better planning and foresight. Certainly foresight is very important. But above all, the lesson I've learned from Rwanda is the need to take ownership of any challenges that we face with. Nobody is going to solve your problems for you. You've got to take leadership, responsibility, and ownership of dealing with any circumstances that you face. For a young nation like Rwanda that came out of genocide, that has been a very, very important lesson for us, because when the genocide happened in 1999-94 against the Tutsi, the world looked on and nobody was able to intervene to stop it. We had to take that ownership to stop it, but we also had to take that ownership to rebuild the country and to consistently focus on rebuilding a new and more tolerant modern nation. So ownership is very, very important, and counting on the strengths that you have and the resources that are available for you to use are very important. Support from outside will come, but it should come when you are ready to use it and when you are already doing the best with your own resources and available means. So ownership is key, important. Also, one thing I want to say is that no size fits all. No size fits all. Each situation is unique. Each circumstance has its own factors and has its own challenges. So solutions that are homegrown, in Rwanda we call them homegrown solutions, or community developed solutions are very, very important, because if you're going to put a suit from somewhere and try to fit it under certain circumstances, it might not work. And that's a very, very important thing to always have in mind. Lastly, sustainable institutions. Institutions are the way to ensure that we actually create some form of stability and create certainty. So it's very, very important that we focus on building institutions that are able to help us cope with these issues and have the right regulatory, environmental framework to enable us cope with uncertainty. I wouldn't want to take a lot of time. I've already taken too much, but I want to thank you and wish you a very successful deliberation during these 1 or 2 days of this conference. Thank you so much.